I've been starting to pull the motor in my BMW. I forgot my camera gear every day except for today, but so far I've got the motor is basically out, so there's basically nothing to show there. But the motor's basically out. I still have to pull the wiring harness off, put the new wiring harness in the old motor, or the new motor, and everything, put the new motor in, new fluids, put the exhaust back on, basically put everything on. But for now, I'm stuck in the process of removing the wiring harness off of the old motor. And this was actually a pretty easy motor swap, way easier than I thought it would be. It was actually pretty simple, only a few things unplugged. But I was just going to take you in the process of removing and swapping this motor. So yeah, let's get on with it. So basically the first step into like pulling or swapping a motor, you're going to want to unplug everything. Not everything, but everything in the way. So like I took off the front end because I guess as BMWs you're supposed to do that. But I took off the front end, unplugged like all the radiator hoses, any sensors that were in the front end like the headlights, the MAF sensor, anything that connects the motor to the firewall, you're going to want to remove. And make sure to label it like I did. It helps it when you're putting it back together. Just so you know where everything went, because there's going to be a lot of stuff you're going to be like, where did this go to? Because a lot of things look the same. So you're going to label everything like I did. And plug, like I said, didn't label all. That goes to the ECU. But label everything, and then when you're under the car, you're going to want to remove the exhaust. And anything that connects like the motor to the transmission, I pulled it out together, so I left them together. But anything that connects the transmission to the car, unplug, label, same thing, disconnect the drive shaft, unbolt the motor mounts, and I actually had to drop the subframe. But other than that, it was actually as easy as it sounds so far. You just unplug everything and pull it up. So let's get on with it. From the harness box, and I labeled every plug, took videos of where every plug goes. That's like the main process of removing the engine. Just make sure you label everything. Everything. If it's a bolt, put it in a bag, label sensor, I don't know. But label everything. Now that I got this out of the car, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the motor out. I'm just gonna slide the engine hoist back and the motor should come right out. So the motor didn't want to just slide right out, and when it does that, you don't just want to pull it out like just forcing, because see, I had this, looks like it's a ground. It's connected from the motor mount to the frame rail, and yeah, luckily I didn't just rip that off, so I had to buy a new one. But yeah, so that's the last thing holding the motor in. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that nut off and slide the motor out. So we got the old motor and transmission right here, new motor right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this on the ground and pull the transmission off and attach it to the new motor. So let's give that a go. So what I've got going is I have a series of tires. I have a spare, then I have an actual tire under the motor and transmission, and I'm going to lower it onto the tires so that way I can get it all going. So, yeah. So now I'm going to start swapping the wiring harness onto this motor, transmission onto that motor. I think the headers might be the same, so I'm not going to touch those. But that's that. That's way simpler than it seems. It's actually really easy to just swap a motor. It's my first time doing it on a BMW. Also, I've only did it on Subarus because I'm a Subaru person, but first BMW motor was actually way easier than I thought. It's kind of just a plug and play thing. So it's kind of hard to see in the time lapse, but basically what I'm doing is see like this sensor. It's a little bright. Well, like this sensor says oil filter housing top. So this sensor goes in the back of the oil filter housing, so that when I put it all back together, puts in back there. You can't really see it, but plugs in right there. And so that when I put it all back together, I know where that sensor goes and what it does. And I'm doing that with basically every wire. Like, the key is to label. Like, I really don't know what 90% of these sensors do. So I'm labeling every single one. Like, trying to give some detail, like it plugs in under the intake manifold or plugs into the back of the alternator or something. And then see, you got all those ones. The key is to label. So basically that's what I'm doing, is taking the wiring harness off, following every wire, seeing where it goes, unplug it, label it, and on to the next one. So I'm going to put it back into the time lapse. Alright, so I got everything disconnected from the motor and the transmission, and I got it ready to pull apart. So I'm going to go ahead, jack up the motor, remove all the bolts that hold the motor and transmission together right here, and pull it apart, and pull it apart. So I got all the bolts out. There's about 6, maybe 8 or 10 that surround the transmission to the engine. And I also forgot to mention you had to take out the torque converter bolts because this is an automatic transmission. So I removed the torque converter bolts, all the bolts that connect the transmission to the engine, and now I'm separating it. And if you can't see, it's already loose. I think I can just pull it off. So. And there we go. I can't really pull it back anymore because it's a little heavy and it looks like the transmission cooler is holding it back, but let's see if I can scoot it back. So today I got the old motor out of the car, wiring harness off the old motor, old transmission off the old blown motor. Everything that I need off the old motor is off, and I have the new motor sitting right there. I need to take all those accessories off because that has a different wiring harness. So I need to swap the old wiring harness from this car onto that motor, put the transmission on there, and hopefully put it in the car. But I'm gonna call it a day. As you can see, everything's off. everything's gone.
See, clear.
But yeah, it's actually way simpler than you'd think to actually like pull a motor like this. But there's not much more I have to do. I should be able to get it done within the next few days. So stay tuned for part 2 of installing the motor. And this is just for future reference, this is a 2003 BMW Z4. It's also like same motor and basically wiring as a E46 or like an older 5 Series. Basically any BMW from 2001 to 2005. But yeah, I should be done in the next few days. So stay tuned for part 2.